Hey guys, welcome back to another guide. Today we're going to be talking about corporation management, buyback program specifically. So now this is kind of a hot topic, and before we get into hey, what's a buyback? Why is this important? Let's start with a something fun. Let's start with a scenario. Let's say you are an Eve Echoes player. Hopefully you are because you're watching this video. Let's say you go into JITA and you know what the typical market prices are, and you just so happen to look up a Stabber Fleet issue on the market. You find that this Stabber Fleet issue is selling for 6.5 million ISK. Now, being a good market player, you know that the Stabber Fleet issue normally goes for about 65 million ISK. So what likely happened is that the seller made a mistake, maybe dropped off a zero, left it off, and now it's 6.5 million ISK, 10% of what it really should be. So you immediately buy this ship, regardless or not of if you have the skills to fly it, if you have cannons or anything like that. It doesn't matter because even worst case scenario, you're just going to flip this and resell it and make 50 million ISK in a matter of a few seconds. So right away, what happened in this scenario? Well, the seller has lost ISK, and the buyer has gotten lucky and made a nice payday and profited off of the misfortune of the seller. Now, in the free market trade of Eve Echoes in this economy, that's fair game. It's okay to profit off of someone else's misfortune, someone else's mislisting of the item, because these could be rival members, these could be rival alliances, or just botters, who knows, right? These could be just random players. It's kind of like a victimless market crime, if you will. So unfortunate for the seller, but a nice luck for the buyer. So we're going to reference this scenario again later on, and you're going to see why, but keep that in mind, and we're going to come back to it. So let's talk about buyback. What is a buyback, right? What are we talking about here? Is that like an animal or something? No. So the buyback is a program that a corporation will start for one word: efficiency. A corporation wants to be as efficient as possible because the corporation ideally wants to be successful, wants to grow. These are all things that a corporation or a group of players should keep in mind for long term play. If you generally want to be moving forward and not just being stagnant or going backwards, hopefully that's not something you're doing. Okay, so what? So what are you buying? Are you buying popcorn or shipwrecks? You're going to be buying. This is specifically a miner's buyback. It's not a military buyback. It's a miner buyback. What are we talking about here? So we are talking about buying ore in its raw form, not minerals. Ore in its raw form. And why are we not buying minerals? Well, to answer that question simply, when we're going to go back to this later, one of the reasons why is because we as a corporation, the corporation would like to refine these ores with the maximum efficiency possible to generate the most amount of revenue possible to work with when talking about some of the cost factors, the limitations when distributing the final products of said ore. Okay, so how does it work? Well, it's different for each corporation. They can use their own mathematical formula for how they like to calculate it, but the basics always hold true. The basics are the same: input and output. You're going to take something in for a price, and you're going to produce something for a price. Now, it's no matter what formula is used, it's basically going to hold true or look very similar across everybody doing this program. For corporations at least, that don't want to take advantage and are doing this in a fair way. And we're going to see why. We're going to have some examples of this in a moment here. But we're talking a little bit just general before we talk about the math. We're going to talk about it in a general way. So, does the corporation offer 100% of JITA prices for the miner's hard work? No. Well, why is that? Why doesn't the corporation offer 100% of prices like they can get at JITA? Well, there's a lot of reasons for this. First of all, the corporation, if they were to buy the ore for JITA prices, they cannot sustain their program. Eventually, they're going to run out of money because they're basically, when they try to resell this product, whether it's in ore form or final product form, they're just going to be losing money. And the program will eventually dissipate, and the miners will no longer have a buyback program which they can use. So, long story short, let's talk about some of these goals. The goals are having a program, a basis where you can sell, and having it being self-sustainable, having it being something that won't collapse on itself. So the corporation is going to offer a rate at which the program can, well, self-sustain. And we're going to take a look about how that affects both the buying and the selling as a result. So what kind of prices can the corporation offer to the miners? Well, typically you can see buying rates at 50% or 75% or 80%. These kinds of numbers are not uncommon. So the question becomes, why would the miner ever want to sell to a corporation at 50 to 75% when they can just go to JITA and sell for 100%, right? Wouldn't the miner want to make full profit off his hard work? And the answer comes down to yes and no. There are inherent costs to trying to sell at JITA. For example, that takes time. All of a sudden, the miner has to stop mining and go and bring his product in a hauler and make a trip down to JITA, and good luck getting through those stargates, for example, into JITA, and or wherever else they are selling. And the problem is this costs time that the miner could have just spent keep mining for those rocks and getting more of the ore product overall. And maybe he could have sold his product for a little bit less than JITA price, but with the time he has saved by not traveling to JITA and selling to the corporation, and likely the same system that he's mining in, then he could have made up that difference with time efficiency. Now, there's another reason for this, and the second reason is safety. Now, for the miner to be efficient, he or she is likely not going to be traveling in a baby frigate that carries such a small amount of ore, because then that player would have to make numerous amounts of trips back and forth from their ore warehouse to the JITA market. They're likely going to be bringing a hauler that's slow, has a chance to get destroyed traveling through low-sec and null-sec systems. Chances are the miner is a bit of a care bear and probably doesn't have the best understanding, for example, of how to stay safe, or maybe they just want to autopilot and get done with it without being hardcore and really manually jumping and watching out for any presence in the system, or scouting ahead with an alternate character, or any of these hardcore things. The miner probably is not going to be that kind of player. So the miner will get some value out of the safety of not having to travel to JITA, and therefore retaining their money. If they had lost their ship, then they would have not lost not only the ore that they would have sold, they would have also lost time for getting more product, and they would have lost their ship, which also costs ISK. That's a huge loss for the miner. So as you can see, there are a variety of factors here. Another factor could just be taxes. Let's say the miner doesn't have any skill points in accounting to lower their taxes at JITA market. Maybe they put all their skill points into mining itself. This will also take a cut into the miner's profits, whereas the corporation and the buyback program can offer to curb partial amounts of the taxes, or maybe some corporations can curb all of those tax costs. And needless to say, the buying rate for the corporation for these players will outweigh the small differences in profits that the miner can make by going to the JITA market. So that's an example of how this is a bit of a give and take. You're gaining some things, convenience, time, safety, and the corporation is taking a little bit by offering a slightly less competitive price for that ore as compared to the JITA market. In fact, most of the time, these buying and selling prices are directly related to JITA market, because it's the most populated marketplace, and it's usually the most accurate in terms of reflecting the prices with supply and demand, as opposed to that one market in the middle of nowhere that has one product there that's 9 times as expensive because there's only one product there, for example. So we're not referencing, PX 175 in the middle of nowhere. We're referencing a central hub that players can congregate and sell most actively to have the best and up-to-date, accurate market prices. With that being said, let's just jump right into the math now, and we're going to get right into this here. Okay, so I'm covering up Corporation C on top of me, so I'm going to get my face out of here in just a moment. But I have a breakdown of 3 different corporations: Corporation A, Corporation B, and Corporation C. And we're going to take a look at these factors that go into this buyback program here. So here we are. So first of all, I've made some assumptions, and it doesn't matter if these assumptions are true or false, whether your corporation changes and tweaks these numbers about who gets profit or whatnot, because in this example, it's applied uniformly. Whether or not it's tweaked and these numbers are changed, it really doesn't change anything except the actual math in the formula itself, which will still give the same result eventually with a couple small changes here and there. Doesn't change the big picture, in other words. So first of all, let's take a look at the contract fees. Now, I actually have a document that I'd like to reference really quick here for what these contract fees look like. So any contract is going to elicit 2 4% fees: a broker's fee for 4% of the contract price, and a transaction tax for 4% of the total contract price. That's, in other words, 8% cost of the total price per contract. And we see that listed in my document here. Contract fees 4% twice, taxes 4% twice. And the reason I write twice is because I've made the assumption that we are going to make a maximum of 2 contracts. One of these contracts is going to happen when there's the exchange between the miner and the corporation. The miner is selling the ore to the corporation who is buying the ore, is going to elicit this 8% tax on the final price. However, the corporation is also selling a final product, a final good that was made from these ores, and to a potential buyer, hopefully from the corporation, for example, or they can sell it if nobody offers to buy it from JITA for taxes as well. So there's going to be some taxes either from JITA, or there's going to be another contract fee for 8% again at the tail end of the final exchange of goods here. Now, blueprints also have a cost, but these costs vary. And we've made the assumption that manufacturer fees will cost 14.3% of the manufacturing job. The refiner fees are said to be 25% of the total refiner efficiency. And we've made the assumption, just for a document, that the refiner efficiency is going to give us 20% increased value for our ore. Now, we keep talking about ore buyback. Why don't we talk about mineral buyback? Well, here's why. If the corporation is buying ore, the corporation can gain a little bit of ISK in the back by changing that ore to minerals at the best possible efficiency through the refining skill, and therefore recover some of the losses that are going to take place throughout the transactions that go forward, and for everybody that wants to take a cut of the product being made and eventually sold. However, if the corporation were to buy minerals, well, minerals can no longer be further refined, and this eliminates that potential 20% assumption here, and the corporation cannot gain any value from the transaction, and therefore will be operating at a higher loss compared to, which is just going to summate with the other losses, like the contract fees, like the blueprint cost, like the manufacturer fees going forward. So this is why the corporations would like to buy ore as opposed to minerals. It allows a buffer of increased value so that the corporation can front the costs that are going to be going into the equation here. So let's take an example. Let's say a corporation has 200 million ISK. And let's say, as a product, they'd like to make a Carrico Navy issue. Now, at the time of this video, Carrico Navy issue The lowest price is being sold for is 62 million price, 62 million ISK on JITA. Let's say this corporation A, is buying ore from miners at a rate of 50% of JITA price. This means that they're buying at 50% for the miners. So the miners getting 50% value. So for the corporation paying 200 million ISK, the miners are going to have half of that value, essentially. So the corporation is gaining up to 200 million in value of ore value. The miners are going to be getting 100 million ISK. And the corporation stands to gain a net of 100 million ISK. Again, if the corporation is buying 200 million worth of ore, paying 50% price, the miners are getting 100 million ISK, and the corporation, if they were to sell it at this point at JITA, they would be getting 100 million ISK profit, not including the resale taxes at the JITA market. But this is not what's happening. The corporation is not flipping this product and then doing, like I said before, taking that risk and doing the time it takes to go to JITA and sell these products. And the whole point of the buyback program, again, in the macro aspect, the whole point, the big picture, is that the corporation wants to grow. It wants to build. It wants to make things. It wants to get those ships. It wants to get those structure components. It wants to keep those materials so that the corporation can just keep going and grow. So let's take a look at what happens first. First, we have agreed to buy ore from the miners. That's going to elicit the contract fee of 8%. So taking away from we're going to be looking at just primarily the profit here, just for simplicity. The 8% is going to take off that 100 mil profit and bring us down to 92 million. So without anything else, we're down 8 million as a corporation. Let's say we refine that ore now and we gain, again, 20% efficiency of that 100 million ore. Again, we're looking at the profit aspect here. And let's say that nets us an additional 20 million because we're getting 20% efficiency. We're adding 20 million onto that 92 million, and we're getting up to 112 million. But the refiner needs to get paid for his work, right? We need to pay the refiner something. And whether it's 25% or 20% or 40%, it doesn't matter. That's just a variable that can be modified for other corporations or whatnot. But the basis holds true. Unless the refiner is willing to do it for free, there's going to be an inherent cost here, and that is going to be another 5 million. So let's take off 5 million. That brings us down to 107 million profit. Let's say the manufacturer job costs 7 million for the Carrico Navy issue. That's going to bring us down, of course, because someone's got to pay that cost. The corporation's going to pay that cost. It costs 100 million ISK. Or excuse me, it brings us down to 100 million ISK profit. Cost 7 million ISK. The manufacturer who ran that job and specialized and put his points and time into this product is going to want to have compensation as well, right? If the manufacturer didn't get compensation, then the manufacturer wouldn't want to do the work, and then he'd rather do his PVP or PVE, whatever he's doing at the time, and then we'll get backed up and nothing will get done. So again, we're assuming there's a 14.3% manufacturer fee. That's going to come down to just 1 million here, which brings us down to 99 million profit. The material cost. So in addition to the manufacturing job cost for starting the blueprint, and we didn't take into account the blueprint costs here either, but let's say whatever that is, we'll consider it negligible for now, but it's not negligible in the future. Let's say the material cost for running this job is going to cost, the Carrico Navy issue, I looked it up already, is 50,274,496 ISK. So we obviously take that from the profit because we're building it, so we're using up our resources, we're using up the minerals that we've gotten, and now we're down to 48.72 million ISK. Now let's say we turn around and sell that Carrico Navy issue. This corporation is selling at a rate of 50% because they're buying at a rate of 50%. It's pretty linear. What you buy for is essentially what you can sell for. So selling at a 50% discount from 62 million JITA price brings it down to 31 million JITA price. So the corporation can sell at that price now. That raises the corp's profit from 48 million to 79 million. Hooray. But now there's a contract fee. Again, 8%. Why? Because the corporation just made a contract to a player exchanging ISK for Carrico Navy issue. That's going to take off another 8% of that 31 million. It comes down to about 2.5 million ISK, which is going to lower the corp's profit to 77.2 million. So the miner collects 50% of the pay of his payday. He gets 100 million. The military saves about 50% here as well, because the military, instead of going to Jita to get the Carrico Navy issue for 62 million, they just bought one for 31 million. Wow, the military just saved 50% ISK. What a steal, right? Whoa, what happened here? The corporation just lost 23%, because the corporation is down to 77 million ISK from their 100 million profit. So which means if the corporation is losing 23 million, 23%, how many times can we run this process before the corporation has no more ISK to pay out these fees, to run these jobs? This program is unsustainable. This can't be done indefinitely, and the program will close. The miners will be sad. The military will riot. Things will burn. Let's take a look at Corporation B. In Corporation B, we have something very similar, except now the Corporation B here, they're offering a more competitive buying rate for the miners. They are valuing the miners' time. They're saying, hey, the military are out there doing dead space anomalies. They're getting like 50, 60 million a day at minimum. What about those miners that hurt? Their only source of income, for the most part, is going to be selling to the corporation, just selling their ore, selling whatever they've done. So to emphasize the miners' value and to give them an opportunity to make money, the Corporation B has raised the price to 75% buy rate. This means that, just like in the first example with Corporation A, they're going to be selling at a rate of 75%. It's linear. Whatever they buy, that's the rate they sell. Because the more they offer as on the buying end, the less they can offer at a discount end. It should make sense, because this money's not it's not coming from nowhere. It's obviously coming from somewhere. There's only a limited amount of money at the end of the day for how this process works. So let's take a look at that sample again. Carrico Navy issue back to 62 million Jita price. We're looking at about that net price. So if the corporation is buying at 75% now for 150 million, the miners are taking home 150 million, but the corporation has 50 million in profit. If the corporation were to turn this around, the corporation would make 50 million in profit from Jita, not including the resale taxes. But wait, the contract fees hit for 8% again, so that brings us down to 46 million here. If we were to refine this and gain a 20% efficiency, that would add 9.2 million profit on top of this to 55.2 million here. Actually, it would add essentially 20% of 50 here. It would just add an additional 10 million, which would bring us to 60 million or so, rather than the 46 million, because that's just what the fee is for the corporation, but the ore is technically still there. In fact, the 200 million ore is still there, but we're taking a look at it from the corporate perspective of profit, because that's where it comes down from, and to simplify the math. So the math from there is not entirely correct, but let's assume it is, and let's assume it was 55.2 million here. The refinery cost is going to have 2.3 million, because again, we're paying about 25% of a refiner fee. That's going to take us down from 55.2 million to 52.9 million. The manufacturing job cost is the same at 7 million, brings us down to 45.9 million. The manufacturer cost is still about $1 million. Nothing changed from Corporation A, 44.9 million for the corporation in profit. The material cost is the same, 50,274,496 ISK, which brings us actually down to negative 5.34 million as a corporation. But now, here's where the corporation can get its profit back, is by selling the CNI, the Carrico Navy issue, at 75% rate here. 75% of the 62 million ISK Jita price is 46.5 million. That brings the corporation to 41.15 million ISK. Contract fees hit again for 8% from the corporation exchanging the Carrico Navy for the member of the corporation is buying the Carrico Navy. And that's 8% of the 46.5 million total price in the contract. That's 37.86 million ISK. again, we're expecting to break even around 50 million for the corporation to just not lose money here. The miner collects 75% for their ore value. The military saves 25% off the JITA price. Instead of paying 62 million ISK for the Carrico Navy issue at JITA, the military is now saving that 25% and buying it at 46.5 million ISK here. But the corporation lost 24%. Again, these numbers should be the same, with the minor change between the refinery rate up to the total ore value. But it should be 23% or 24% or so. These numbers should be the same between Corp A and Corp B. So the corporation has essentially lost 12.13 million ISK in this example. So once again, the program is unsustainable. Let's take a look at Corp C now. Now, Corp C is doing something a little bit different. Corp C is offering a buy rate of 75%, but the sell rate is 90%. So the corporation C here has decided to incorporate some of these fees into its selling price so that it can, stay more afloat, so that the corporation doesn't sink at each order, at each contract going forward here. So we're back to the Carrico Navy issue with 62 million JITA price. Nothing is different here. Everything stays the same. Buying at 75% for the ore for the miners. So the miners are getting 150 million ISK worth. The profit, if the corporation turned around and sold it right now at JITA, would be about 50 million minus the taxes. That's not what's happening. What's happening is a contract fee of 8% because of the exchange between the ore and the corporation, which brings it down to 46 million ISK. The refined gain is adding 9.2 million. Again, it would be about 10 million if it were just on the top of the 50 million here instead of the contract fee part. But it brings it to 55.2 million ISK here. Not a big difference, really, just adding an extra 0.8 million ISK, 800,000 here. The refinery cost is going to be 2.3 million, paying out the 25% for the refiner fee so that the refiner keeps doing this job and doesn't say, I don't get any money, why do I bother, I'm not going to do this anymore. So then it will obviously put a stopgap in the program to begin with. That brings this corporation to 52.9 million ISK profit. Now the manufactured job stays the same, cost 7 million, brings it down to 45.9 million. The manufactured cost is 1 million here for the manufacturer getting paid, so that he also says, I want to continue doing this and not have a stopgap here when no manufacturer is going to put a job in. So that brings the profit down to 44.9 million ISK. The material cost stays the same, 50,274,496 ISK. Again, brings it down, the corporation here down to a negative 5.34 million ISK. So what does this mean, being at a negative value? Well, first of all, it means that the corporation has to sell these products. If the corporation doesn't sell these products, then the corporation just doesn't regenerate the money to begin with, right, to continue the cycle. So now let's say this corporation is selling the Carrico Navy issue at 90% JITA price. That's going to be 90% of the 62 million ISK, which comes down to 55.8 million ISK. That's going to raise the corp's profit from negative 5 million to 50.45 million. Again, there's going to be a contract fee of 8% just for the exchange, which brings the corporation's profit down to 45.99 million ISK. The miner collects 75%. The military also still saves 10% off JITA price. So everybody is still win-win situation for the most part. The miner, again, has that safety, has that efficiency, has the time. And the military didn't do anything, but the military is still saving 10% on the back end of the JITA price. So instead of paying 62 million for that Carrico Navy issue, the military of this corporation is getting it for 55.8 million. They just saved 10%. The corporation in this example lost 4%, going from 50 million profit to 46 million, which is a small loss of about 4 million ISK. And again, the program is unsustainable for Corporation C until these small modifications are changed such that the corporation can break even. Again, the expected break-even point for this corporation is 50 million, back where they started before they did this whole cycle of converting the product and selling and getting the contract fees, the manufacturer fees, the refiner fees. And why do we want the corporation to break even? Well, so that the program becomes sustainable. But even if the corporation breaks even, the program may not be sustainable still. And why is that? Well, because the person that is updating the spreadsheets and doing the work, the admin work, the administration work, the person that is starting these contracts and managing the corporation contracts between the miners, the person in charge of the buyback program, who's also making the contracts for the military and selling the Carrico Navy issue, the person who's doing all of this head work here, all this work here, has to get paid as well, has to make a little bit of money, because otherwise that person, which is probably going to be one of the leaders of the corporation or a director or officer, is going to probably get burned out eventually, and that person probably wants to play the game too, right? That person deserves to have some playtime and enjoy the game for themselves. So this is work, and the person doesn't want to, come home from work and then do more work. This administrative spreadsheet editor for full time, maybe a little bit here and there. Some of it is fun sometimes, but after a while, all of it becomes a job. This is why it's important for the corporation to make a little bit of money on the back end. Maybe 1%, maybe up to 10%, it doesn't really matter. So long as the corporation is generating a small profit, such that the person who's doing all this work maybe can get a little bit of a little bit of ISK as well, such that they can appreciate doing the work and not get burnt out, because it is a lot of work to do this. So a good corporation, needless to say, will want to keep a spreadsheet, will want to keep a document so that they can track their expenditure. What are they spending on the buyback program? How much does the ore cost? And how much are they eventually turning it around and reselling those minerals, that ore, into a final product to allow them to recoup some of their losses as a corporation overall, and thus allow not only a sustainable program for the corporation to continue spending for the miners, but also for the people that are maintaining the spreadsheet and doing the document and giving their time to keeping this program afloat overall. So it's not just about breaking even, it's also about rewarding the people that are committed to doing the program, to running the program itself and making sure the numbers are correct. Additionally, it also allows the corporation to have a little bit of a buffer in case the small mistakes happen. Just like I did, a small mistake, a little here and there, just on top of the prices. In terms of the profit, there can be small mistakes here and there, and then that's just natural. It's going to happen. It's a phone game, right? There are going to be small mistakes here and there. So it allows a little bit of a buffer, such that we're not 100% break even, such that a wrench gets thrown in at any small cent or integer loss, and then all of a sudden we need to incorporate more money into the buyback program just to start running again for whatever loss that is incurred. And finally, the whole point is such that the corporation can make a little bit of growth as well for the buyback program, such that everybody is profiting. We want the miners to be profiting. We want the military to be profiting. We want the person that's running the spreadsheet to be profiting. And the corporation wants to be profiting a little bit as well, because that's part of the point of the buyback, right? The corporation is doing everyone a favor here by changing these prices up and doing a lot of this work here, such that we grow overall. We make it more efficient for the miners who don't need to go to JITA. They can sell immediately. We make it more efficient for the military to get better prices, and thus can rearm, reship easier, and make it more efficient for the corporation to grow by getting a little bit of ISK as well, and then using that ISK to maybe generate a small some rigs or some modules, or for the hangar one that's free, so that people can rearm their ships, and just some small costs like that, nothing major. So in other words, when this program is running, the corporation, what they stand to gain here is very negligible, if anything at all. We're looking at negative, in all these examples, the corporation has lost money, but ideally the end goal is that the corporation has 0% return, or a little bit more than 0% return, up to maybe 5 or 10%, such that they can have something to work with as well and reward the people that are doing this in the first place. So where do we go from here? There's more to talk about. For example, let's talk about being a consumer. Now let's say you're a military pilot and the buyback program is specifically targeted toward the miners, but of course the corporation can turn around and sell the final products to not only miners, but also the military, because they're going to be selling maybe Carrico Navy issues, and the military are going to be more interested in that than the miners. So let's say we have Corporation C, who has rewarded their miners with a higher buy rate of 75%. Because of the higher buy rate, they can no longer afford a heavily discounted final product. They have to sell, in this case, for Corp C at 90% of G to price. This leads to a smaller discount for the military. Now, this is okay because, again, the military are running all these dead space anomalies and they're getting a lot of money anyways. So they can afford not to have a heavily discounted, 50% price for the most part in general anyways. But let's say the corporation member was not understanding the buyback program, or maybe was a little bit stingy with their ISK, or they just were logical, not even greedy, but they were just logical and said, hey, hold on, I have no idea what a buyback program is, but our corporation is selling a Carrico Navy issue for 55.8 million ISK, but hey, look at Corp B. Corp B is selling a Carrico Navy issue for 46.5 million ISK. Do I want to buy from Corp C or Corp B? The consumer, the military pilot, would rather obviously buy from the cheaper source no matter what. Now, does this mean that Corp B does this mean that Corp C is greedier than Corp B? No, it doesn't mean that, because Corp C is trying to stay afloat. Corp C has minimized their losses as much as possible by increasing their sell rate such that they can make the program sustainable and break even. Corp B is losing 24% per transaction here. And Corp A is doing pretty much something similar, except the Carrico Navy cost for Corp A is much cheaper. It's at 31 million ISK. So the military would like to go to Corp A and buy the final product from Corp A, but it comes back to the first example. Again, now I want you to think back to that scenario at the beginning with the Stabber Navy, the Stabber fleet issue. What happened there? What happened there was that the buyer profited immensely, but the seller suffered. Nothing changes in this example of the buyback here. So wherever the buyer profits or gets a better value, someone in the equation, someone in the production line is suffering. And if you look at it, Corp A miners are suffering. They are getting less payment for their work, their time, and the military are getting a better value. And to make matters worse for Corporation A overall, what would happen if Corporation A miners decided, I don't want to be being paid at 50% rate for the ore when Corporation B and C are offering me a more competitive rate for my ore, my time? So Corporation A's miners are going to riot and go to Corporation B and C to sell to them. Let's assume these guys are all neighbors or in an alliance or something like that. So now Corporation A's miners are no longer selling to Corporation A. They're selling to Corporation B and C for the higher rate. So the miners are getting paid more. So Corporation B and C are happy about this because they're just getting more materials and overall more final products that they can be making just to eventually build up their corporation, etc., etc. But let's say Corporation C military are not happy either because the sell rate is very high compared to Corporation A. What does this mean? It means that the Corporation C's military pilots are going to riot and say, I'm not going to buy from Corporation C, I'm going to buy from Corporation A at the 50% sell rate. So what happens here? Well, Corporation A and C in this example are going to suffer, but I'll explain why the suffering is going to be worse for Corporation A compared to Corporation C. So the military is going to buy from Corporation A now, and they're going to be buying at 31 million final product for the Carrico Navy issue. Since Corporation A's miners are no longer selling their ore at the 50% rate to Corporation A, Corporation A has to be getting that material source from somewhere else. Maybe it cheated for full price, for example. Or maybe they're just going to run out and then that's going to be it. They're going to be done. They're not going to have any more materials to make those 31 million Carrico Navy issues. So the military from Corporation C buying from the 31 million source is essentially stealing in a way from the pockets of Corporation A and the miners. Additionally, from that, we're going to be seeing Corporation C's military pilots ultimately profiting and being happy. Corporation C's miners are also going to be very happy. But where does Corporation C have a problem? Corporation C is going to have a problem in the fact that Corporation C is not going to be able to get their money back. Since Corporation C is no longer selling their products at 90% market price to their own corporation members or to anyone else for that matter, since they are offering the highest price for the Carrico Navy issue, this means that Corporation C now needs to take their products to JITA. And for the most part, this is going to make the buyback program slower. It's not going to completely dismantle and destroy the program like it is going to do for A in the long term if that action keeps up. But it does mean that Corporation C needs to take that extra step. Maybe employ some corporation sellers and take the product to market, to JITA, and then pay that JITA tax to eventually regenerate that principal to pay the miners the 75% and restart the cycle over again. So this is detrimental, again, mostly because it takes more time, and the Corporation C needs to also probably pay those corporation sellers a percentage as well, and that also is going to dip into the cuts once again. So then maybe the buy rate for C needs to change once more to include the corporation sellers for that plan, that program, and maybe the buy rate for Corp C eventually needs to be changed to 65% or 70%, such that the inclusion of the Corp sellers can have a claim or a stake into the final product. So as you can see, the whole takeaway here is this. Any one of these programs, granted with some small tweaking so that such that the program becomes sustainable, can be functional and can work, so long as you're looking at the formula in the entire chain, in the entire production chain. What I mean by this is that the math works with Corporation C's, all of their pilots, the military and the miners. The military needs to not be greedy and accept a 10% discount as opposed to the 50% discount from another source, another corporation, because the math will allow this to be reasonable, will allow this to be flexible and regenerate this program overall. Once you start mixing and matching different parts of the equation, you taking the best rates of the miners rate and then mixing the best rates for the military rate at different parts of the equation for different corporations that are offering these different variables, that's where the problems start to happen. Eventually someone's going to suffer, and more than likely, obviously Corp A is the one who's suffering in this case. Corporation C just needs to spend additional time and potential profit cuts to get the product to market at JITA. So what is, again, the whole point of this, the takeaway, is the program, the members of the corporation should always work with their corporation, because it allows everyone to be in sync with what's going on in terms of the corporation. I know if a person that was in the military, they saw this and they were like, wait a minute, I want to save the most amount of money possible. Logically, I would do that too. It would make sense if I didn't understand from a macro point of view all of what's going on here about why the corporation needs some money as well, or it needs to break even, or all these costs. Everyone gets a cut here. The manufacturers get a cut, the refiners get a cut, the person doing administrative work but maybe on the spreadsheet might get a cut, the person who's selling the products eventually might get a cut as well. They move the products and take that risk just going through low sec and null sec to get to market. Might want to get a cut. And the contract fees itself are very expensive. Just sending out the contract, again, is up to 16% total between the contract fees and the transaction taxes. That also takes a cut, and then that number can't be lowered. So you can see that there's a lot of, it's not about corporate greed for the corporations that are trying to do a feasible program. There's nothing like corporate greed going on for the most part, I guess, unless your corporation is really trying to be stingy or try to switch the variables around. Even if the corporation is offering a lower buy rate for the minerals and for the ore, they're also offering a final lower price for the sell. If the corporation is offering a more competitive buy rate for the ore and minerals, they're also offering a less discount on the final product for their ships at the end of the day. Again, it also comes down, it's pretty linear here for the most part. But Corporation C has made it a little less linear because Corporation C said to stay afloat and not sink as a corporation 24% per transaction, I need to also account for these contract fees, the refiner fees, and manufacturer fees, and all these other fees into the sell rate to make a little bit more to account for all these fees such that they can kind of stay afloat and keep the program running to regenerate the products. So obviously, It really comes down to teamwork. It really comes down to looking at the whole picture from a macro point of view, not just selling for the highest rate and buying at the cheapest rate, which will only profit an individual, but it can definitely be a detriment to an organization or a corporation. Some corporations and organizations more than others. Remember, the takeaway, again, the third takeaway, just like my first example in the beginning with the Stabber Fleet issue. If a buyer is getting the deal of a lifetime, is making money or saving money, someone else in the chain is suffering. Someone else is losing money. Is it going to be the miners? Is it going to be the corporation? Someone else is suffering because that miner or the military or whatnot got the final product for a big discount compared to what they could have gotten at JITA or another corporation. So only compare these rates to JITA. Do not compare the rates to other corporations, because that's what the math is based off of in comparison. The discounts are based out of JITA price, not the next door neighbor's price. That's why the corporation buyback is essentially being called the corporation buyback, not the region buyback or the alliance buyback or anything like this. It's specifically tailored for only inclusive members of a corporation, and it is fair, even though it may not seem like it. It may seem complicated and such, but it is fair at the end of the day for these players overall, for both military and miners, considering the mechanics of the game, and that miners stand to make less overall compared to the military, who are doing more anomalies that can be generating more income over time. The final thing I want to say is this, and this is an important takeaway as well. Let's say the military were to destroy a rat, a pirate, and an anomaly, and pick up an item. Let's just say that item is an MK7 railgun. Doesn't matter what it is. This is just an example. That MK7 railgun came from nowhere. Came from just came from the pirates. Just the game itself. Nobody made that MK7 railgun. It was just generated, and now the military pilot has that. Let's say the military pilot then goes to JITA and sells the MK7 railgun for 1 ISK, and let's just say that there were no taxes on this transaction. What this means is that the military pilot would have a net profit of 1 ISK. Let's say the manufacturer instead does something similar, except they make a product, they make a module, they make a ship or an MK7 railgun, and let's say they bring it to JITA and they also sell it for 1 ISK. The difference here is that their net profit is not 1 ISK. Their net profit is going to be, minus 15,999,999 ISK, because you're not factoring into how much it costs to make the item, how much it costs to be a detriment and all the ISK that was sunk into getting that item. So the military can get items out of thin air and being sold for whatever price, and it's still a move in a positive direction. But the people who produce the items will always have a big loss here, just by the fact that they're incurring these prices just by manufacturing and making the item. They need to at least break even, or obviously they're not doing it for fun, for breaking even. They want to make a little bit of profit at the end of the day as well, so that they can enjoy the game and buy their expensive ships or expensive skills and such like this. So yeah, this was a mouthful, but hopefully this made sense, and it can explain a little bit more about what a buyback program is, why it's essential, and what the math kind of looks like, and why mixing and matching different corporations and different prices is not really feasible for the program overall in a macro aspect. As a micro aspect for the individual person, it might be the best choice, but in a macro point of view, it really hurts everybody in the long run, in the long term here. All right, so with that being said, thank you for checking out the video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe. And if it was a little bit hard and need some clarification, let me know down in the comments below how I can make this a little bit better and explain it further going forward. Thanks again for checking it out, and I'll see you guys next time.